The first reading comes from the book of Exodus, found in the Old Testament, also known as the Hebrew Bible. The Lord said to Moses, "Come up to me on the mountain and wait there, and I will give you the tablets of stone with the law and the commandment, which I have given for their instruction." So Moses set out with his assistant Joshua, and Moses went up into the mountain of God. To the elders he had said, "Wait here for us until we come to you again, for Aaron and Hur are with you. Whoever has a dispute may go to them." Then Moses went up on the mountain, and the cloud covered the mountain. The glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the 7th day, the Lord called to Moses out of the cloud. Now the appearance of the glory of the Lord was like a devouring fire on the top of the mountain in the sight of the people of Israel. Moses entered the cloud and went up on the mountain. Moses was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And then the end of the story here. Moses came down from Mount Sinai. As he came down from the mountain with the 2 tablets of the covenant in his hand, Moses did not know that the skin of his face shone because he had been talking with God. When Aaron and all the Israelites saw Moses, the skin of his face was shining, and they were afraid to come near him. But Moses called to them, and Aaron and all the leaders of the congregation returned to him, and Moses spoke with them. Afterward, all the Israelites came near, and he gave them in commandment all that the Lord had spoken with him on Mount Sinai. When Moses had finished speaking with them, he put a veil on his face. But whenever Moses went in before the Lord to speak with him, he would take the veil off until he came out. And when he came out and told the Israelites what he had been commanded, the Israelites would see the face of Moses, that the skin of his face was shining. And Moses would put the veil on his face again until he went in to speak with the Lord. This is the word of God for the people of God. Thanks be to God. Our gospel reading comes from Matthew, the 17th chapter, the Transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus took with him Peter and James and his brother John and led them up a high mountain by themselves. And Jesus was transfigured before them, and his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became dazzling white. Suddenly there appeared to them Moses and Elijah talking with Jesus. Then Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings here, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While Peter was still speaking, suddenly a bright cloud overshadowed them, and from the cloud a voice said, "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell to the ground and were overcome by fear. But Jesus came and touched them, saying, "Get up and do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus himself alone. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Let us pray. I ask that you pray with me, and I ask that you pray for me. O most gracious and dazzling God, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of each and every heart and mind here gathered be pleasing to you, for it is indeed you who are our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Over the past several decades, much has been written about the connection between the creative process and spiritual growth. At some level, I've always known such a connection exists. But in what ways, I wasn't sure. So imagine my delight when I heard that a theological seminary near where I lived actually had a whole program devoted to the connection between the arts and religion. I phoned them. Within the hour, the director for the Center for the Arts and Religion at Wesley Seminary returned my call. I still remember our first conversation. I told her, I teach secondary school art in Alexandria, Virginia, and I want to learn more about what I have always thought is true, that the arts and spirituality are connected in very deep and profound ways. Over the next 4 years, I learned far more about that connection than I ever dreamed of, and far more than I can tell you in the next several minutes. The arts enhance our ability to connect with the divine. This isn't news. We know that reading poetry or looking at paintings can inspire us in our devotional lives. But somewhere along my own spiritual journey, I recognize that as inspiring or edifying as great works of art can be, that it is the creative process itself that really enhances my own spiritual development. The creative process artists use, and not only persons who practice and perform in the fine arts, but gardeners, farmers, cooks, research scientists, preachers, teachers, architects, building contractors, and loads of others. That process is in essence the same process that we engage in on our spiritual journeys. How do we come to know more deeply the God who creates, redeems, and sustains us? How do we draw more closely to our Lord Jesus Christ? How do we encounter the divine? Our Old Testament and Gospel readings speak of new insight gained through encounters with God. Both Moses and the disciples Peter Peter, James, and John gain a deeper understanding of the divine through a process that takes them up a mountain and back down again. When something lifts our soul to new heights, we say that we have had a mountaintop experience. Someone or something transformed us. We're not the same as we once were. But the new insights we gain is not an isolated event. It is part of a larger process. It's part of the creative process. It's generally acknowledged that there are 5 stages within the creative process: preparation, frustration, incubation, illumination, and finally, elaboration and communication. During preparation, we define the challenge. Now, this doesn't have to be complex. We decide to bake a cake, or write a letter, or paint a painting, or select music for a special occasion, like a band competition. Along with contemplating the challenge, we may begin to prepare physically our materials. Then comes frustration. There are just simply so many possibilities. We don't know what type of cake to bake, or we don't know what to say in a note to a friend whose spouse just passed away. Or we don't know what to paint, what subject matter to use, or which hymns to select for Transfiguration Sunday. A period of incubation follows. Now, this may take little time, or it may drag on for quite a while. It takes as long as it takes. We live into the mystery. We trust that sooner or later, all those possibilities, all that frustration will get sorted out. Developing a tolerance, preferably a high tolerance for ambiguity, allows us to get through this stage and not get stuck in it. It's an excellent time to engage in a great deal of prayer and reflection. Then that mountaintop experience happens. The new is born. Eureka! Aha! In his book, Coming To, William Dean speculates that the word aha may be onomatopoeic for the word Yahweh, found in the Hebrew Bible. The experience of the divine, like the creative breakthrough, causes an indwelling of the breath that produces a sound very much like aha or Yahweh. Elaboration and communication follow the aha. This is often called the perspiration stage. A reminder that creativity is indeed actually 10% inspiration and about 90% perspiration. The creative breakthrough, the aha, lasts but a brief time. Then the hard work of giving shape and substance to the insight takes over. About a week after Peter had confessed that Jesus was the Messiah, Jesus takes Peter and James and John and goes up on a mountain to pray. While he prays, Jesus' face changes and his clothes become dazzling white. The disciples, although sleepy, notice the change and that Jesus is talking with Moses and Elijah. Just as these two great characters of old get ready to depart, Peter blurts out, not unusual for him, "Master, this is a great moment. We could build 3 memorials, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." Just then a cloud comes and envelops them. Buried in the cloud, they become deeply aware of God. Then a voice from the cloud says, "This is my Son, the Beloved. Listen to him." This is the disciples' aha moment. When the heavenly voice fades, they see only Jesus. But they do not see Jesus as they saw him before. They have witnessed his glory. Now, indeed, they know that Jesus is Lord. On that mountaintop, Jesus was transfigured. But something else happened as well. Peter, James, and John were transformed. What led up to this moment of breakthrough, to this divine aha? The creative process that leads to deeper spiritual insight. First, Jesus and his disciples prepared themselves to prayer. Then Peter, out of frustration, blurts out the wrong thing. Thirdly, the cloud overshadows the 3 disciples, allowing them a brief period of incubation, of reflection on who Jesus is. Those 3 stages bring the disciples to their illuminating moment. Eureka! Aha! Jesus really is the Son of God. After the resurrection, Peter and John would lead the other disciples in the early church in elaborating and communicating what they had seen about Jesus that day on the top of the mountain. A quick review of the events leading up to our Old Testament reading will help us remember the story of Moses on Mount Sinai. As he returned from being on Mount Sinai, Moses saw the golden calf the Israelites had molded. And he saw the people dancing around the calf. Out of anger, Moses threw down the stone tablets that God had engraved with God's law. God too was angry, and God's anger towards the people became a problem for Moses. So Moses entered into a lengthy period of preparation. He pitched a tent outside the camp of the Israelites. When Moses entered the tent, the pillar of cloud would descend and stand at the tent's entrance, and the Lord would speak to Moses as one speaks to a friend. But Moses became frustrated with the situation, and quite frankly, with God. He pleads with God to let him know what God intends for him and for the Israelites. Moses knows that God can take several different actions against the people. He understands the possibilities. God instructs Moses to cut 2 new tablets of stone and to come all by himself back up to the top of the mountain. So early in the morning, Moses goes to the mountain. This is his incubation time. Once again, God descends in a cloud. When Moses appears before God, God passes before Moses and proclaims the name of Yahweh. Now Moses gets it. Aha! Now comes elaboration. God renews the covenant with the people. This elaboration of the aha experience can take a long time. Moses spent 40 days and 40 nights on the mountaintop with God. This aha experience with God was so overwhelming that when Moses spoke with God, his face would glow. But he didn't realize this. When his brother Aaron and all the people saw Moses and his shining face, they held back. They were afraid to get too close to him. Because he needed to communicate the words of God to the people, Moses would put a veil over his face when he talked to the Israelites. But when he would speak to God, Moses would remove the veil. I wonder, have you ever known anyone that when they talk about God, their face just shone? You could just see the love of God on their face. Now, most of us will never experience the mountaintop experiences of Peter and Moses, but we can encounter the divine through the creative process. The God who created us invites us in turn to participate in a creative process that allows us to encounter more profoundly the transforming power and love of God. We can prepare our hearts and minds for God's presence. In our spiritual journeys, we can prayerfully prepare for God to open us up to see new possibilities, to ask new questions, to pose new solutions. Phil, I would say that the presbytery, whether they knew it or not, engaged in this very creative process. We can accept the frustrations that come in due course. And my friends, as we gather here this time without a regularly assigned pastor, I want to repeat that. We can accept the frustrations that come in due course. We can live into the question, what is God calling me to do at this time of my life? Instead of considering these frustration times as troublesome, we can view them as part of a journey that leads to deeper spiritual insight. Times of ambiguity and uncertainty become opportunities for us to live more acutely in the midst of mystery. We allow ourselves to rest a while in God, to go for a walk, sip tea with a friend, take a nap, chill. Because then it will happen. It may be wondrous. It may be an epiphany. The light may shine so brightly that it nearly blinds us.
Eureka! Aha! God is here with us. Yahweh, God Almighty, God glorious, God gracious. God's call in our lives becomes clear. We've got it. But that's not the end of the process. It wasn't the end for Moses, and it wasn't the end for Peter, James, and John. There's more. Now comes the elaboration and communication stage, the part in the process where we respond to the insight we gained from our aha moment. We come down from our mountaintops, and the real work, the hard work of the creative process begins. If you're an artist, you display your paintings. If you baked a cake, you proudly serve it to others. You mail that sympathy note to your friend. As we move through our days and weeks and months and years, we experience this process over and over and over again. From early childhood, we dance and sing and play and paint and plant and cook and teach and preach. We were born to travel through the creative process. We were born to open ourselves to this journey that takes our spirits up the mountain and back down again. It's God's way of sojourning with us, continuing to create through us, and allowing us to experience aha moments throughout our lives.